Tervetuloa Aalto-yliopiston ylioppilaskunnan edustajista
Welcome
kokoontumiseen
to Aalto University Represent Council meeting for 2021. It's now Thursday, 27th of May, 2021, and it's 5:17 p.m. opening the meeting. Closing item 1, moving to item 2, recording the members and deputy members of the council who are unavailable, disqualified, ineligible, resigned, and present. So Elina, if you may. Thank you, Chairperson, and good evening, everyone. So let's start the roll call. Let's start with Kem.
Paikalla.
Kiitos. Eklund.
Paikalla ollaan.
Yes, Heinilä.
Paikalla.
Kiitos, Haavanlammi.
Paikalla.
Yes, Pusula.
Paikalla.
Yes, Lindgren.
Paikalla.
Kiitos, Jaatinen.
Paikalla.
Luoma.
Paikalla.
Ahola.
Paikalla.
Fiilman.
Paikalla.
Kiitos, Helaniemi. Oliko Heikki Helaniemi? Eipä taida olla. Onko tulossa? Onko tietoa?
Ei ole ainakaan ilmoittanut minulle mitään, että ei olisi tulossa.
Ok. Mä laitan myöhässä ja sanokaa tosiaan kaikille myöhässä tuleville, että ilmoittaa chatissa, että milloin tuli ja kellään vaikka missä kohdassakin. Niin
Please let them know that they should inform us in the chat that when they arrived.
Paikalla.
Next we have Kainulainen.
Mainiota, Huikuri.
Paikalla.
Kiitos. Ansamaa.
Paikalla.
Mainiota. Sitten Kouvo.
Paikalla.
Kiitos. Kokoi. Kokoi. Matias.
Is Matias Kokoi
Tietoa.
present? Or does anyone know if they're coming?
Ei ole hänestäkään kuulunut mitään, että
We
olisi
haven't
jäämässä
heard
pois.
anything.
Ok. Sitten mennään sille,
Okay.
että on myöhässä. Ja
And I'll mark down that they're late.
hänelle. Hänen suuntaan Saari.
Saari.
Seuraavana. Ja mainiota. Sitten Virtanen, Eletra.
Juu, paikalla.
Yes, kiitos. Soivio.
Paikalla.
Mainiota. Riihimäki.
Paikalla.
Hienoa. Laitila. Oli äänessä monta kertaa. Hienoa. Sitten oli Riikonen.
Paikalla.
Loistavaa. Sitten olisi Imran. Are you here?
Imran?
Yes, you are here.
Yeah, I'm here. No niin, kiitos.
Kiitos. Lammi. Lammi ei kuulu, mutta ikkuna näkyy. Ja naamakin. Siellä ollaan. Hyvä. Palosua.
Moi Elina.
No hei Iida. Wilhelmsson.
Paikalla ollaan.
Excellent. Nyberg.
Paikalla.
Hienoa. Sitten oli Heikkilä.
Heissan.
Heissan. Pitsen.
Paikalla.
Mainiota. Miettinen.
Täällä vittiavaruudessa.
Upeaa. Pohjonen.
Joo, paikalla.
Mainiota. Pyhälammi.
Paikalla.
Hienoa, kiitos. Ja sitten onko paikalla joku, jonka nimeä ei mainittu? mainittu ja olisi täällä äänivaltaisena.
And is there someone here whose name was mentioned? Yes, Pollari from Schisma.
Samoin Laitinen Skisma.
And also Laitinen from Schisma.
Excellent.
Yes, excellent.
Oliko joku muu Skismasta vielä?
Anyone else from Schisma or from some other group?
Tai jostain muualta sopii myös. Kaikki muut oli mainittuna. Eli jokainen äänivaltainen on sanonut,
So yes,
tänään.
everyone who has the right to vote has said that they are present. Okay, thank you. Jans probably wants to know how many of us are here. So, let me see.
Listaus toimisi.
Huomasitko ton kokoin tuolta chatista? Oli saapu tossa just hetki sitten.
And also did you notice Kokoi informed in the chat that they arrived? Yes, thank you. I didn't notice that.
Myös näköjään tää mun Excel ei nyt näytä.
Nothing wrong with my Excel, so just a moment, please.
Niin. Kun täällä on vähän niinku jotain jännää tapahtunut kaavalla. No ei se mitään.
Yes, I have a problem with the calculation here. Just let me fix that.
Se on 33.
So we have 33 members present.
Kyllä.
Yes, thank you.
Pahoittelen viivästyksestä.
Joo, ei mitään hätää.
Sorry for the delay. Oh, that's okay. So, we have 33 members of the Representative Council present. Grant the right to speak and to be present to our vice chairs, board members, OPS members, and interpreters. Anyone else who needs to be granted the right to speak or to be present? Apparently no. So we can close item 2 and move to item 3, recording the lawfulness and quorum of the meeting. The meeting is lawful when we have at least 25 members of the Representative Council present and the chairperson, and the invitation to the meeting has been sent 7 days prior to the mailing list, bulletin board, and AYYE website. And if these conditions are met, the meeting is lawful and has quorum. And our regulations do not prevent us from holding a remote meeting, even though they do not mention it. And we'll now say that this temporary legislation is not directly related to us, but when considering circumstances, it is prudent to hold the meeting remotely, and all members have the ability to be present and to take part in the meeting. This interpretation has been made based on the Universities Act, where it talks about the autonomy of a student union. So we can say that the meeting is lawful and has quorum. Closing item 3. Moving to item 4. Election of 2 persons approving the minutes and 2 vote counters. So we will elect the people who will approve the minutes and their vote counters and the vice persons for all of them. And as before, I proposed that the scrutineers of the minutes will act as deputies to the vote counters and vice versa. Opening discussion. Any suggestions? Have Fielman as a volunteer for a scrutinizer of the minutes. And also Laitinen. Yes, so we have two scrutinizers of the minutes. We just need two vote counters. I don't see anyone in the chat volunteering. So Elina, do you have any suggestions for vote counters? Yes, we have our first volunteer, Pyhälammi.
Joo, mä voin ehdottaa, jos...
Yes, and also I can make a suggestion for the second one.
Ehdotan esimerkiksi...
Well, Ellen Heikkilä, are you available? I really can't count, so sorry, I'm not available. Sorry. That's okay. How about Lindgren? Yes, I'm available. Excellent. So we have our 2+2 closing discussion. And so the scrutinizers of the minutes are Filman and Laininen, and their deputies are Pyhälammi and Lindgren. And vote counters are Pyhälammi and Lindgren, and their deputies are Filman and Laitinen. This has been decided. Closing item 4. Moving to item 5, confirming the agenda. The agenda for the meeting has been sent with the invitation to the meeting. Does anyone have anything to add or comment on the agenda? Apparently no. So I think we can approve the agenda as is. Closing item 5, moving to item 6, announcements. Opening discussion. So, any announcements to make? Laitinen? Yes, Laitinen for Skisma. Just a quick note. I didn't receive a personal link to the meeting. Just wanted to mention this. If it causes any problems during or after the meeting, or if there's a problem in some list, there's the same problem with Pollari. Yes, this is just because Skisma didn't announce that any of their members would be present, but no, this doesn't cause any problems for the meeting. And next, Filman. Thank you. I want to announce that we have had the cleaning bee for the village, also the Ukkos Day. So now it's very clean, the whole village. Much cleaner than after May Day. Yes, excellent. Anything else to announce? Yes, I'd like to announce that last week we received information that the Joker tramline that goes through Otaniemi will be completed ahead of schedule. So if you have planned your graduation in connection with this tramline, then you should hurry. Anything else? Yes, sorry, Laitila. Laitila, Kylterirengas. I'd like to announce that the coming days we've just over 50% of people aged over the age of 60 have now received their vaccination, so that's a very positive thing. Thank you, Laitila, for this great piece of news. And then we have Pajukari. I'd like to announce that the preliminary voting for municipal elections started yesterday. And you can vote, for example, at the Teikkari village or at Dipoli. And I want to encourage everyone to take part in this celebration of democracy and exercise their right to vote. Thank you, Pajukari. Excellent announcement. I encourage everyone to vote myself as well. Next we have Ekrus. Thank you, Chairperson. We are very far into May, but I still want to say that May Day is forever. Vapu ei lopu, as we say in Finnish. Thank you. Anything else? I don't see any other request for floor, so we can close the discussion. And also record all the announcements in the minutes. Closing item 6. Moving to item 7. Latest news from the office. We have Laura Nikola presenting from the board. So Laura, the floor is yours. Yes, that's correct. I'll be presenting the news. I share my screen. Just a moment. So you should now see my slides and hopefully also hear me. But let me know if something's wrong. Good evening, everyone. Also to our viewers at home. So we will go through the latest news from the office. And I'll be presenting them, me, Laura Nikola, member of the board responsible for corporate cooperation, alumni and strategy. But without further ado, let's see what we've been up to. Because say that there are a lot of news this time. But I still try to keep this presentation quite short, quite quick, but also easy for you to follow. If you have any questions about the presentation, please write down your questions so you can ask them at the end of the presentation. So yes, let's start with the news from the board, what we've been up to. There'll be a lot going on with the board. We will be doing very well. First, I want to mention the Student Center project, which has progressed very well now. I also have a separate slide on that as well. We also examined our projects in the action plan. Of course, we've done it otherwise as well. Standard procedure. Part of our ongoing operations. Just to check how we're doing with our projects, what's going on with their timetables. And you'll hear more about these and the June Representative Council meeting. Also, we've done some networking with 7 different student unions and with KY's board in this kind of seminar we had. Some of you may also have noticed that we have released the 2 first episodes of AYYE Studio. This is our new kind of concept where we show in a video format. There are also a couple of members from the board telling what's up with AYYE and the board. This time we talked about the municipal elections, facilities, and also some highlights from Yodel. And so the kind of purpose of these videos is to make our decision making more transparent, bring it closer to our members. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram, so please check them out. We also had May Day, Vappu, since the last meeting. We had a lot of celebrations, Vappu celebrations. I think one of the most visible ways to celebrate was our Vappu studio, which lasted for several weeks. It contained a lot of different events. And as Emil mentioned, the village cleaning bee, we also had that after May Day. I think we did an excellent job in cleaning the Tekkari village. And also Aava had this checkpoint tour, for example, in addition to our other Vappu activities. Then you had the message for the Flower Day. We delivered this message to Helsinki and Espoo, where we talked about the importance of outdoor areas, especially during the pandemic. Wanted to emphasize their importance also in the future. And Tuomas from the board was also part of the delegation who delivered this message. And the board will have a holiday during July. So some of us will go on a holiday right after the last Representative Council meeting in June. Here you can see some photos. Here we have Milja holding the Vappu speech. Then about what's going on with the COVID news. Well, first of all, AYYE has started with Aalto University, has started planning for orientation and use of the campus. And we are intent to communicate about AYYE's exit strategy for things that are important for our community related to the coronavirus restrictions. For example, our facilities and events. And the purpose here is to give the opportunity to associations to adapt to the future restrictions and regulations. Try to communicate them as best as we can. But also have a very fresh piece of news. Here I mentioned the cancellation of the booking for our one-time rental facilities, but actually today the board decided in their meeting that we can let go of some of the restrictions starting the 1st of June. So public events and private events and meetings, a maximum of 10 people can be indoors, and outdoors a maximum of 50 people. Of course, the precondition here is that in these events participants can adhere to the Ministry of Ministries instructions. But this being said, so try to communicate as soon as possible about our one-time rental facilities, how the situation develops. So more information will follow. This is just the latest bit of news. AYYE is still working mainly remotely. And in June, we will plan how we will use the office at the end of the summer and for the autumn. And also the council released a statement about the Aalto's exit strategy and how to engage associations in it. You can find this on Facebook and Instagram, among other channels. And if we can follow the current vaccination schedule, then that means that in Espoo, people aged 20 to 29, half of them will be vaccinated by the end of July, or by the middle of July, that is. Then about HR and administration. We have gone through the results of our workplace survey. And we saw that there is a need to think about ways how to alleviate the workload and stress through communications and prioritization, among other things. Of course, the coronavirus situation also affects this. And the migration from audit to the SISU system is also underway in our administration and member services. And we'll also inform you of any service interruptions. And also our Central Election Committee has started its work. Berneri Huhtinen acts as chairperson for this term. And the very important part in these elections is the acquiring an electronic voting system. And also we've met with Aalto's head security officer and discussed with them about campus safety. Since there have been a rise in thefts, for example, at the campus, so we had some discussions that we're on the same page what the situation is. So that what we can do so that the situation will not worsen even more. And there are some staff changes here. Hilla Mäkelä came back to work with us part-time. She started on the 10th of May. Also Inka Mattila, our summer employee for the service team, started her work on Tuesday, the 18th of May. We also have a new non-military worker who will start their tasks on the 2nd of June. And also our Student Center project coordinator, Marianne Honkasaari. Her post ended on the 14th of May, so we've had a recruitment to replace her. Or the recruitment process is underway. Also, Petteri, our chief IT officer, will stop working at AYYE at the end of May, so we'll have to recruit someone to replace him as well.
So also, some of the biggest news that some of you might have heard is the Student Center. So AYYE, KYYE, TF and ACRE have signed the system for the contract for the Student Center, concluded after long negotiations. Has caused a lot of work for the board and our experts and our management. So all in all, it's a very, very wonderful result, which should be celebrated in according manner. And I mentioned that Marianne is leaving in the previous slide, in addition to which we have a joint communications that have been working on. Then some of the strategy visualization project. The strategy visualization company was chosen to be Ellun Kanat based on the competitive tendering that ended in March. And with them, or facilitated by them, we should start to work on the strategy in the form of a strategy workshop next month. Here the idea is that as we are currently working on the strategy, we will also be avoiding overlapping with some of the other workshops. We aim towards a diverse participation and hopefully offering people enough information before the workshop. The process also has interactive presentations and 2 rounds of commenting. We should be able to finish the visualization in August, well before the orientation week. Then on the community side, on the organizational association part, some bullet points. We've been handing out operational grants. We're actually doing the, not handing out, but doing some of the groundwork on the update on the operational grants. Also, we have some other updates regarding Tilakähmyt, which is the reservations and other projects. We will take these to the goal, hopefully during the fall, after which we'll have these up for the Representative Council for discussion and decision. Then regarding clubhouses and warehouse spaces, some current issues. The board approved in their meeting a scoring model for associations for the usable venues, and this updated model should take into account the diversity of the association and their financial situation. Also, the community committee has been heard when drafting this model. The idea is that this model would work to support the organizational association sector and does not affect current rental agreements. And the joint applications process is still open for a few days until the last day of this month, next week's Monday. In AYYE facilities, we have 2 empty clubhouses and 8 storage spaces. And the opening of this applications process has been tendered to the associations when it opened back at the start of the month. Then some archiving museum news. The museum opening day should be taking place in August. Hopefully the coronavirus situation is good enough that we can organize it then. The update of the museum's name is coming well in accordance with the schedule. We will be publishing it next month. The board also approved the political program for collections, which has to do with the museum, our collections of art archiving and objects. It helps to depict what it's really about. We'll have some museum updates during the summer, and probably the upcoming regulation change will enable us to apply for grants from the National Museum branch of government. On other community side news, the orientation week planning is progressing very fast and well. Same with the community framework project. It's progressing very well on all fronts. Also, corporate cooperation development has been undertaken throughout the spring based on the new strategy. More information will follow in the June REPCO meeting. Then we can fly off to advocacy and communication side. On advocacy, We have student representatives that have been named to the Aalto University Board Naming Committee. The committee presents to the Academic Affairs Committee people to be named into the 7-person board that Aalto University has. We have 3 members that are resigning their posts currently. According to our policy paper, the group needs to have a student representative. We've been developing it throughout the summer with the best means we have had available, and on the 11th of May we have this request based on which we have named Suvi Vendelin as the student representative into the committee. Other focuses and highlights on affecting what we've been working on throughout the summer. For example, the Aalto strategy update process and the Ministry of Education and Culture higher education accessibility plan. In the summer and also at the start of the fall, we will have the student representative practicality development that will take place. Municipal elections. Yes, Tiina mentioned these already before. They are right around the corner and the preliminary voting is ongoing and is continuing on the dates specified on the slide. The election day is on the 13th. AYYE is campaigning that even more young Espoo residents would use their right to vote in the elections, important elections, and it would be important to get people up and about voting. Also sent the AYYE goals for the municipal elections that have been sent to political parties, and they focus towards a carbon neutral, diverse and well handling and well-being Espoo. Also our expert member Fronin and Tiina Paivakari's blog on why you should vote on the municipal elections. Then there's also a few events that have just taken place. There's World Student Capital panel on the 18th and the English panel with a community or environmental theme, which took place yesterday. On the communication side, the new AYYE communication strategy is being worked together with Tekiri. And the first out of which 2 workshops undertaken on the 18th. And we should be ready with the strategy at the end of June. Then we get to the real estate services and facilities side, almost at the end of the slide deck. On real estate and real estate development, last meeting we actually had the Miesten Tie 2 project and what's happening there. On Miesten Tie's part, I'll say that currently the different options are still under survey. We talked about how we'll get more information in May, but no more than what we have right now. On the Otokari side of things, the preliminary contract negotiations on plots are ongoing. Services and living and housing. Repetition is the mother of learning, so we have this applications process is still for clubhouses and storage facilities is undertaking and until the end of the month, and also have the Tila Kähmyt, the reservation preliminary period until the same time. Something that has been ongoing and the requests for bookings have been looked at. Things are progressing very well on that front. On living side, there's one highlight on the Monday, 10th of May. We have opened some of the facilities that were closed due to the pandemic. clubhouses, individual facilities, and gym rooms. It's good to take note here that you need to follow the official rules given by the authorities to use these facilities to avoid any pandemic spreading in these facilities. On other parts, other news, last slide by the way, a couple, well actually kind of individual news on participatory budgeting. So the Aalto University has this kind of pilot project which goes by kind of this name that €1 for each student. How should the university use it? Share your idea by the end of this month. Actually by the 30th, so by this week's Sunday. So there's actually a direct copy on how you can actually find it on AYYE web pages. I also have a focus highlight on the Facebook page. So you may definitely go and look at it and think that if you have any good ideas, please share them. New kinds of unique opportunities for advocacy. If it looks like this might get off the tarmac, as it were, we'd actually get something nice in the future, continuatively. Then, as a final part, we have this mystical rest of the news will be given during the meeting. Have to do with this is that I could say maybe that for this day, some news regarding the Tekkares 150 party. This kind of decision has been made by the board that we would be organizing this shindig on the 19th of November 2022. So, clear date for that. Hopefully we'll get more concrete information on this once we get, well, more info. And as an upcoming highlight, several of these upcoming highlights, but with the board we've had discussions on projects that we will be giving up, because in the background, the fact that for a long time we've discussed that we have these real estate items or plots or housing, that there are some buildings that are just not serving our purpose and the purposes of our members due to their location or other reason. So, because all the studies have now focused towards Otaniemi, these targets are a bit further from campus. So, for example, Puotila, Herttaniemi, so they're kind of a bit far off. So we have this preliminary discussion and tendering on whether or not now is the time to move forward with these items. Of course, this is something that will be specifically listed and brought to the RepCo. Of course, Otto from us can, of course, second after I finish my speech if you want to bring some more details into play. Probably remember them better than me. That was pretty much it. So thank you for listening to me for such a lengthy amount of time. It was kind of a condensed package. So if you have any questions, now is an excellent time to present them. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Opening discussions. And we have, I think, the first request for the floor. Pielman. On item museum, how many name suggestions would we get in the end? Yes, that's actually an excellent question. I actually can't remember the answer off the top of my head, but maybe we have Sarah here somewhere could maybe comment. I am here, and I think that Petra may answer because I can't answer for some. So for the museum, we had an open form for the entire community. I think we had entries in the amount of 200, out of which were duplicates. So I think individual unique entries amounted to about a little bit less than 100. So these could be categorized in kind of a similar or very, very close variants. We have gotten a lot of them, and we have then progressed with the expert group, so ECRUS, as the chair. And continuation is that I've heard that from these names, about half of which were from the Polytechnic Museum. So I can't remember numbers really. How many were what? I could probably check if needs be. If we could get these from somewhere, it would be really, really nice to know. You can get the information from the email mentioned. Thank you. Next up, Pollari. You mentioned that AYYE municipal election goals. I'd like to know that does AYYE have any zoning related lobbying for Otaniemi? Yes. Regarding AYY's 4 municipal election goals, I was thinking of was it really pertaining to zoning? Maybe own answer and check these, but of course if Tiina wants to comment or it seems like Milja wants to answer. Thank you, Chairperson. The AYYE municipal election targets have been listed. And this zoning issue goal as the following, that we want that all plots or construction projects environmental effects are evaluated and while trying to take into account carbon neutrality. We also have highlights on public transport and light transport and sorry, I'm looking at the wrong item. Sorry, we're talking about zoning. So the answer to that is that we will focus on the requirements of commercial spaces in buildings. And for ARA targets, we should let go of those requirements. And of course, we have this plan for living quarters and apartment buildings. So we get the numbers there, or that Espoo would ensure with the zoning long enough loans for student housing. that are within reasonable distances. What we've done last year is that we've aimed to lobby these our programs into the other programs. Try to lobby those into them. Thank you. Next up, we have a request for the floor from Osberg.
Joo, kiitos puheenjohtaja.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Ihan vaan tuohon Lauran viimeiseen kohtaan noista luovuttavista
On Laura's last item on the targets we are giving up, I would comment that, as you remember, hopefully from the student center discussion, that we had this point about these plots that we should sell, and we started to look at these on our part. We'll have a preliminary decision that what would you sell. It'll be in the next meeting, so you should maybe focus on what items or what plots would be in accordance with our strategy and which are not. So how should we develop our housing and apartments? Thank you, Otto. Any other requests for the floor?
Tulkitsen, että ei ole, joten suljen aiheesta keskustelun ja siirrytään
closing discussions, and we will move to place on record the news from the central office. An office decided closing item 7 and moving on to item 8, amendments to the Student Union Constitution, with Nieminen presenting.
Elina ilmeisesti kopin. Ole hyvä.
Thank you. I will present. Sharing my screen a bit. I'll not share a presentation, but the regulations. Do you see them? A Word document. Regulations of the Student Union. Fantastic. So now we are supposed to be the first acceptance for the updated regulations of the Student Union, which will be in the second acceptance for the next month's meeting. So if you have any proposals for change for this document, you should make them during this meeting, because if we want to change them in the next time, we will need 2 acceptance rounds. So next meeting we should not change this. We should change it now. Some proposals for change have been presented already through the form. So I will also remind you at this stage before this presentation that hopefully if the proposals for change still occur, please send them as soon as possible. So, then to the rules. I will be looking at the main amendments. You can see, like under 4, we have these stylistic corrections. I'll be going through these one by one, after which you may ask and we may discuss. So if you have any questions for earlier parts, you may write them up. What we also discussed in the preliminary discussion have been these changes that have been undertaken for the wrong parts. So the strike-throughs are stuff that's getting removed, and the yellows are additions or amendments. The first biggest one for electoral acceptance, we should remove this phrase here that staff members are not permissible as candidates. We will change that this permissibility focuses both fixed term and permanent contracts. So if we have people who are employed during the upcoming, so if your employment is ending before the start of the term, you can set yourself up as a candidate. So this changes here on yellow. So during the term, you may not be employed. Remember, of the CEC, the Central Election Committee, you're also ineligible. Then going through what's the next change. These references have been changed. It's item 16. Meetings. We have these preliminary changes. We'll meet at least on the first day of December. We'll change it on the 20th of December when we will decide on the primarily budget review. This will bring us more time. That is legit. So 12, 13 and 14 are specific items. So we'll be deciding in May instead of April, so it'll give us some flexibility on the issue. And it's also according to legalities. And here the opportunity to continue with remote meetings. So this is the write-up. We get the regulatory support for these electronic meetings like this one where we are right now. So this word form is as such that in the Finnish that the representative council can have a meeting in an electronic environment where everybody will be participating through a remote connection. The remote meeting will be remote if general security and urgency or other reason requests so. The meeting invitation will be worded so that you will know that whether or not the meeting will be physical or remote. So we are not enabling hybrid meetings. We have been talking about the reasons of why and how can we actually have a remote meeting. And this we've discussed with our legal counsel for this regulation so that this will not be developed in the agenda, but this actually defined here, which makes it a lot clearer on whether or not and when can we have a remote meeting. As always, the RepCo, when it's brought together, we have the relevance that when you have the meeting invitation, it's that everybody should know that will we be physically attending or will we be remotely participating. The change will take place next under 38 on the membership fees. The strike through regards FSHS because we are no longer paying to FSHS. We have this amendment for double students doing 2 degrees. We decided that we will not be presenting it to be changed. We did some other research and we got this depiction that it's probably not the best word form we've discussed a lot with the university. They wanted to change it a lot, and we thought about the procedural question in place that we would have maybe like 200 people doing these doubles. So if we'd give these, they would receive all of these applications for discharge from payment, and it would be maybe unclear that how do these get and how do these not. So it's a bit mixed up. If you're an exchange student, you would not be exempt, etc. So it would be kind of a slippery slope towards problematic situations and lots of unclear situations and unwelcome job tasks. So it's best that, for clarity's sake, we have been enabled this discharge from payment partially or entirely only when you've been proven to have no funds. So this is how we'll have this item in 38.
And for section 39, about significant financial decisions. At the last RepCo meeting, we made a significant financial decision. And we considered this section with our lawyers about what it actually means. But here, the part highlighted in yellow, with the previous paragraph, it says that if the representing council proposes a significant financial decision, but this next paragraph, it may be interpreted that it also only relates to the previous paragraph, but our lawyers think that this also affects the proposals made by the board or the finances board. And if some of these parties disagree about the decision, then it's important that we have the stipulation about these making the decision at 2 consecutive meetings to make sure that if there is a significant financial decision to be made, then you have to kind of specify that it needs to be made in 2 meetings. So this clarification here only just means that this kind of this procedure about 2 meetings is only in situations where the board or the finance board, both or one of them, is not in favor of the proposal. Then it just states what will happen in that kind of situation. And also our lawyers think that it's now clearer, this phrasing here. And also here at the end of the document, in section 51 about the museum, here in, or actually in section 50, yes, about appeals. This is just a change in terms. That it says that can additionally be appealed against to the board. It says previously, but actually we should talk about a claim for a revised decision. That's the correct term here, not an appeal. And here in the end we have a lot of changes. We will add this new section, section 51, the museum, where we say the student union manages a museum that presents history and presence of the student cultures of the student union and its predecessors. The museum activities are on a non-profit basis, and if the student union ceases to exist in its current form, the preservation of the museum collection is secured under the control of a legally competent community as decided by the meeting of the representing council. And we also checked this phrasing with this sponsor museum, the Helsinki City Museum, and we also consulted the Association for Museums. And when we have this section here, it means that in the future we can apply for grants for our museum, which I think is great. That we can get funding also through that. And of course, since we add a new section, we have to renumber the following sections. And then our section 53, responsibility in a position of trust. We edited this based on the preliminary discussion we had. So if a member of the Representative Council can be proven to have significantly harmed the student union by his or her actions, the member of the Representative Council may be subject to a temporary meeting ban at a 5/6 majority of the votes cast. A meeting ban may prevent a member of the Representative Council from attending a maximum of the next 3 meetings of the Representative Council. And in case of serious damages, confidence in the representative may be considered directly at the meeting of the Representative Council, but in case of minor damages, the chair of the Representative Council may issue a written warning to the member of the Representative Council, and if, despite the warning, the representative damages the student union, a meeting of the Representative Council may vote on confidence in the representative. So this is a new addition. We also had a good discussion about this on Monday with the group chairs and good specifications about these serious damage and minor damage, how they are in relation with this causing significant harm. And this causing significant harm, there may be kind of a serious and more minor cases within that. And also we added this majority vote of 5/6. And also group chairs asked that could we have write down something here about repeating a ban. Could it be used to prevent a member from attending meetings, for example, during their whole term? I asked for counsel from our pro bono lawyers, and this is a challenging situation, stipulation, because there was room for interpretation, these regulations, and it's also based on this kind of a subjective assessment. Of course, there need to be justification for that, but it's still subjective. So it's difficult to kind of plug in all loopholes in this entry. So that if the Representative Council wants to add this section to our regulations, to add this tool there, then the Representative Council also needs to have faith that no one will misuse this tool, and also that it's very difficult to misuse it. Because there are many kind of conditions here that prevent misuse. We try to guarantee that it's very difficult to misuse this entry, because it says that it has to be proven that the person has significantly harmed the student union, and also it requires a majority of 5/6. And so it needs to be a very severe case if the Representative Council takes it up. Then it really needs to be grounds and proof about this harm caused. And if you don't want to add this tool here, it's very easy to reject because it's just 2 separate paragraphs here. So if you want, we can remove it here by making a proposal for change to remove it. And of course, then we have to change that when this constitution has been approved by the RepCo and when the president of Aalto University has approved it. Yes, those were the changes made. I think that's it for my presentation. I think now we can have the questions and the discussion. Thank you, Elina. Opening discussion. First we have Filman. Thank you. There's section 16. I think there's a stipulation about holding remote meeting. I think this is too broad, the stipulation here. I think it would need to include that if a remote meeting has to be held because of public safety. I also made a proposal for change on this, and I hope that someone will support me on this. So the proposal for change is that remove this where it says that if the urgency of the matter or other appropriate reasons so require, I think it should be changed to that if the public safety so requires. Because now this gives a lot of power to kind of decide that all kind of meetings can be held remotely, which is not purposeful for our representative council. Because representative council, in a normal situation, they would need to hold it physically, which will also make it easier for attendants to take part in the meeting and follow the meeting. And also this is related to the issue of confidentiality of voting, which in a closed ballot vote is much more secure than in an electronic meeting environment. And other proposal for change that I have is for this section 54. I think the beginning here is good. Or section 53, but I think the rest of it is very inconsistent and leaves too much room for interpretation. Because the only way to vote on the issue is based on what is stated in the start of the section. So I made a proposal for change for removing the rest of this entry. Because the beginning really says how we should act, and I don't think the end part of the section is needed. And I also hope that someone will support me on this as well. Otherwise, these changes make sense and are important. Thank you. Thank you, Filman. Do we have any other requests for floor for this item? Yes, Jaatinen. Yes, hello. Jaatinen from Luova. Try to have a counter comment to Filman's speech about this responsibility in a position of trust, section 53. I personally think that this lower paragraph is also very essential because it also talks about a written warning, which the Representative Council said that they would want this kind of a tool at their disposal. so that in addition to a vote, we would also have a chance for a written warning. Also on Monday, we talked about in the meeting with the group chairs about this, that what if these bans are chained together. But now when I kind of considered the issue more myself, I think the phrasing here is good, like it is, because even if the conditions are met after the 3 meetings mentioned here, then I think it would still need to be reinstated, the ban. I think there are strict enough the conditions here, and if these very strict conditions are met, then there is a reason to issue a consecutive ban for the person. So I don't see that as a problem. And since we talk about the Student Union's constitution, I would very much like to see this proposal for change to be submitted before the meeting, well in time, so that we would have more time to discuss them. Thank you. Next we have Fielman. Thank you. I want to emphasize that the chairperson can issue a warning. I think it's kind of unnecessary here, because if the chair issues they can issue a warning in any case, and in this case of serious damage, if it's seen as continuous, then I think it's already kind of a significant harm, even if it's considered minor. And then chaining these bans together, well, if we look at the principle that we have in our state, in our government, it says that a person can only be punished or sentenced once for one crime. But of course, if they continue to do it, that if they do it again, they may be issued another ban, but they may not be punished for the same act that they have done several times. Thank you, Filman. Next we have Pyhälammi. Yes, Pyhälammi from Vihreämpi Aalto. Thank you for this presentation and this proposal. I am for this entry that we have about remote meetings. I think there needs to be also other reasons for holding remote meetings than just public safety. There are many reasons for that, or maybe many reasons for that. Firstly, it's an opportunity that we should give to represent council members. It may make it easier to participate for some members. I also understand the concerns related to, for example, how quickly meetings are organized or summoned. But I think we should also consider other angles than just public safety when talking about electronic meetings. Thank you, Allu. Next, Fielman. Thank you. Just a counter comment, a reply. There are no other entries in any other documents. This is all a matter of a decision of the chairperson's secretariat. Could I complement this a bit? Yes, the case is like you said, but also the invitation to the meeting has to be sent in time as stipulated in our rules. And also the chairperson or the secretariat doesn't make these decisions just by themselves in a vacuum. They always start. They always take into consideration the opinions of members of the council, board, chairs of the groups. So I don't think that in our world, in our context, I don't think this is such a big concern. because of course there still remains the same the time frame that when the invitation for the meeting has to be sent. It still says the same.
Yes, kiitoksia.
Thank you, Emil and Elina. Any other request for floor for this item? Yes, we got the floor from Fielman. Yes, and if you're interested in want to vote on any one or both of these proposals that I've made, now please say that you're backing them. Thank you. Any other request for floor? Apparently no. So closing discussion. Now, yes. Now before making the decision, I want to ask, are there any supporters for Fielman's proposals for change? Yes, as in previous meetings. I want my proposals and opinions to be entered into the minutes, even if we will not vote on them. Yes, we can do that, most definitely. Yes, we will enter Fielman's dissenting opinion into the minutes. But yes, our motion is that the Council decided to approve the amendments to the Student Union Constitution. We don't have a proposal for change that would have a supporter, so in that case, we don't have to vote on the motion, so this has been decided. Closing item 8, moving, and actually now, before moving to item 9, we will have a 5-minute meeting break. So, meeting break starts at 6:39 and we will come back at 6:44. I encourage everyone to take a sip of water and maybe take a walk around.
visitors. Returning from break at 18:54. First off, I see that we have a request for the floor from Ida Palosuo. Does it pertain with previous items or concurring items or just something else? It is about the agenda. Go ahead. So this one is in English.
At our agenda, and I made the big realization that this might be the day that we make this meeting last
a less than 3 hour meeting. So let's try to get this to get out of here before 8. Thanks. Thank you. So to balance out the atmosphere, you may definitely have your speeches. You don't have to look at the clock that much, but at this stage, let us move on to item 9, preliminary debate on changes to the election bylaws of the student union, with Annika Mällinen presenting. Thank you. Good evening on my part. Speaker seems to be speaking from the other side of the room, so interpreter will have a hard time in listening to anything. These changes are very significant. Hello on my part. I am Annika. I am member of the staff. I am in charge of elections. Going through these proposals for change one by one, like we did with the regulations. I will be presenting these. And then the proposal for change. I'll be presenting these changes. I've also asked Ettari to say something. Sorry, Annika, one moment. Could you maybe get closer to the microphone? Everybody would hear you. Okay, hopefully anybody maybe heard something what I said. We barely heard you, but still. Is this better? I think yes. Somebody might disagree. If they feel the need to disagree, that is. Looks like it works. Yes, there we go. So I'm starting here on the yellow are the amendments, strike-throughs are the ones that are being removed. First proposal for change are on eligibility and the right to vote. So we are clarifying the item because these sign-up registrations can be changed outside of the time, so it would be good to actually have that by what time do you need to sign up that you're eligible to vote. And also for the electronic voting systems, it should have a back deadline when things will be placed into the system, so we can actually get the eligible individuals in 30 days should be adequate for this. In the next item, so for the electronic elections, we have the new systems from our electronic register, and if you are doing an election, items will be provided and then we'll decree eligibility. On eligibility, in sense that I could say that here I have a mistake in preparation, so this first item actually needs to be ignored. So I've had a problematic in relation to our rules and regulations. I've been going through the Valtioneuvosto statute that says that people who have signed up are eligible, but it's also given the opportunity for student unions to also amend these things, and we've decided that our regulations state the opportunity to place yourselves as a candidate, even though if you are not present. So. According to our regulations, all members of the student union are eligible. According to our regulations, also people who acts as a member of the REPCO need to be eligible. So it means that you may need to have signed on as attending. So our regulations talk about this more broad scope of eligibility, which enables the fact that we have individuals who during the elections are not present. In the upcoming term. In the group chair meeting on Monday, we had focused towards a solution where during the term, if we have individuals who are going to exchange ship or are for some other reason unable to attend the student union's activities, but our regulations permit an individual to be as a candidate, even though they might know that they might not be present, they might be not able to attend meetings. So we cannot deny this based on the regulations. Then also this exception to the rule is that CEC, Central Election Committee members, cannot be eligible, even though they might have the right to vote. They can't be eligible as candidates. This ensures that the CEC is and remains impartial. Thus, people who are setting themselves up as candidates are not ones preparing the elections. Same amendment is that during the term, if an individual is employed by AYYE, you are not eligible as a candidate. If we have an individual who is not eligible, they will be disqualified if they've tried to set themselves up as a candidate. Next changes are about the CEC and its composition. We always try to get CEC going before the elections with volunteers. Several years we've had this challenge that we don't have the required number of people, meaning a chair and no less than 4 members, which is that I would lessen this number of people to 3 from 4, and to my evaluation that would not affect the working of the CEC if we just have 3 people and a chair. So if we can't get enough people, we're kind of problematic that during these elections we started to recruit the CEC. We had to lengthen the applications period because we couldn't get enough applications. We had to think of maybe we need to bring this update to the Representative Council earlier. That we need to lessen the requirement and we can actually have a CEC before the elections. Because without a CEC, we cannot organize the elections at all. Because according to the electoral regulations, the CEC is in charge of the elections. And we changed this from 4 to 3. Of course, it means that we need to change the requirement for quorum and legislation. So we need to change that to 3 as well, or 2 in this case. I would also ask that the board will name the entire CEC, but hopefully we'd have it clarified that it also names the chair. So we are in relation with our volunteer recruitment. So we first search for chairs, then we'll get the members. And if we get a situation where we have several people applying as the chair, the board will do the choice of the individual. Also talking about the CEC members should represent the opinion groups in the elections. This feels like this is irrelevant because there's not enough application as is, and this cannot be used as a guiding principle. We also have the assumption that the CEC members will actually have active individuals from the REPCO. That would be individuals already versed in our activities, but anybody can actually apply for the CEC if they're eligible to vote, which is why I'm for striking this. In the end, of course, who can participate? This isn't just something that we actually decide. So I would make the definition that the chairpersonship and individuals and these other parties can be involved in organizing the elections with the CEC. Also add that this term for the CEC. Currently the CEC does not have a term. So it's actually natural that their term would end when the elections end. And that the CEC has presented its report to the REPCO. Next changes in accordance with placing candidates. We are not defined on the placement of candidates. That in practical terms we have had in the candidateship form you have requested for the Electoral Alliance membership. That's something that we could maybe clarify here in the regulations regarding the elections as well. And that it focuses on the fact that individuals cannot sign up on behalf of electoral alliances without the consent of the alliance in question. Also here clarifications on sanctions and regulations. On these items we clarified the role of the CEC. The role also includes advice on the elections during the elections, and also the CEC decides on these possible sanctions and regulations. And the CEC also gives guidance on advertisement stand placing, or you offer things like social media channel advertisement spaces that we will give advice by the CEC on how to act and advice on the matter. Then also the hot potato are the requirements for the electoral system. So we are bringing these up for discussion before your summer vacations. We should maybe make a decision on what kind of electronic system we will be utilizing in the next elections. That these regulations will be guiding our choice of system. And the first part would be that we have this comment that should the system take note of the fact that this system would have the opportunity to vote empty. So the last elections we had one feedback that democracy retains the opportunity to give a protest vote to vote empty, or vote Donald Duck, that is. And this was placed during voting, so the CEC couldn't really do anything about it at the time. So no amendments to the system could be made since the elections were already ongoing. So whether or not we fail this or acknowledge this, that kind of a requirement for the system that you can vote empty, or is this something that will be actually be implemented if the system allows it? Second request for proposal for change will also contain about the open source code, which is that we have kind of this bit challenging situation that in 2017, 2019 votes we used this WHO system, and after the previous votes elections, Petteri Nurmela gave us the recommendation that we would not use it in this upcoming elections. We could get away from this WHO system, and Petteri will probably then speak about it shortly. Petteri is concluding their task at AYYE, which make this purchase of electoral system even more prudent. And also we have the IT support specialist position, which is ending before summer, so currently our IT team will be 2 people. Petter has been the only individual who has managed to get this WHO system up and running, which took about 3 months from Petteri. So looking at resources, it's quite challenging, that actually impossible to use this system without Petteri in the future. Hopefully we should maybe get the assurance before the summer vacations that we actually have an up and running system in the next elections. If we can't have that, we might have the situation where we have a kind of a paper vote, which is kind of a bum deal during the pandemic. We need to start preparing for that if we decide to do this. Also, if you are not opting, well, actually, we'll just give the technical side to Petter, who will be speaking next. So, we have an electoral system, electronic options. We have 2 requirements, one of which is that you have a strong identification method that is functioning, meaning that through Haka-Shibboleth authentication, and that it supports our pretty complex electoral ring and alliance system. The combination of these 2 form a situation where practicals we have 2 systems which support it, one of which is this WHO system, which is an open source program which is by Trevea, which is used elsewhere with student unions. Electoral coalitions, not rings. Apologies. And the second system is not an open source, but offers as a service. WHO system has very many pitfalls, one of which is that the program has been executed with 2 coding platforms, both of which are kind of quite dependent in terms of dependency trees. And looking at this system, because you usually have this election once every 2 years, it actually ends up in the situations where the packages are very dated. And it kind of getting it up and running is kind of quite an uphill battle. Yes, that's kind of the main points, the problematics within. And it's also quite complex to use. The instructions are outdated as well. We tested it during the last elections with a test system and noticed that it doesn't really go into the production phase, and in production there were significant deficiencies which the test system didn't really highlight, which is why I would recommend that the student union would use a system which would be more broadly in scope. So it would be just something that we would have to update ourselves, then in the best situation it would be a service that we buy as a service. Currently, this only option is the closed code system by Trevea. Yes, thank you, Petter. The situation is that these two systems which are available is the HU system and this Trevea system. And our IT resource system is just not enough. I don't see it as prudent or possible that we would have the opportunity to get this HU system up and running again in time. And if the Representative Council sees that this open source code is something that we still need to have, then I see that we will have a situation where we have the paper vote up in front of us during the fall. So it's kind of good for me to receive some sort of direction. That if you decide to stick with the open source code, we will have to leave with the CEC start preparing for the paper vote. The electoral system is here as an open discussion, preliminary discussion, because we haven't discussed them before, and I understand that organizing these elections and the requirements cannot be approved in this meeting, but I've asked that we should have a guidance vote so that I know that how me and the Central Election Committee would develop these from here on out. And is there a possibility that we can actually move forward with purchasing the service from Trevea? The CEC has also hoped that we could maybe in the electoral system could give up this requirement. I'll go through these the rest of the changes. Lowercase parts regarding ICT vetting. So I think we have in the last update round we have kind of something that has been outdated. It's that the RepCo does not appoint the CEC, and there is no regulations that the RepCo could actually follow when appointing the ICT specialist. So this ICT audit will be named by the CEC. Changes also regarding vote counting. That the vote counting will be similar regardless if it's an electronic or paper vote, but in an electronic vote we will have these, not have these committees, electoral committees. We have the CEC and the affirmation of the results of the vote will be affirmed in the minutes from the election system, which is electronic. And when we have actually a paper election, we'll be counting these preliminary votes, and then we'll also have these electoral committees, which will be doing the counting during the vote days. The system for somehow talked about the second voting day, but we usually actually have only one election day. We usually have actually have several election days, and usually this we should have this election, so this final date on a weekday, so that the vote counting will be happening on the day of the elections. These are all the proposals for change on my part. I'm pretty much ready with my slide deck. Thank you, Petter, for helping me here. Thank you, Annika, and Petter as well, opening the discussion. First, just question and request from Fielman first. Thank you. Fielman from Volt. The question, I think I missed something, but I still have thoughts, is that empty protest votes and their giving should be definitely something that we should have. Like mentioned, they are a big part of democracy. But essentially also, when discussing changes, this eligibility, when we have added this and I see that individuals who are employed, they would not be eligible. I think that this is a very problematic decision since it's a change, because it creates lots of questions in regards where we can't have any answers on when will this be deemed be, how will these work relationships, what defines a work relationship. Maybe we just have people hiring after the vote. It leads to strategizing where you don't even want to, in a certain manner, go into an employment relationship before the elections have been kind of done and dusted. So, because our regulations remove the eligibility to be in the REPCO if you're an employee, of course, it means that eligibility should not be hindered. Like if you are eligible, who are on a fixed term contract during the fall, if you have like a small spring task, like 2 weeks of employment, if we know this during the elections that this is up and coming, it's been agreed upon, then this individual's participation in REPCO activities is being narrowed down too much. So, narrowing down the eligibility for individuals who are employed, this should be stricken from this update. You should not be affected by your employment status. Otherwise, of course, CEC members are clear, etc. Then, on the electoral system, how much would this Trevea system cost?
On ennakoitu, että noin 2,000 € meidän tarpeen mukaan. Eli per vaalit? Per vaalit. Per vaalit.
Sorry, the interpreter missed that. Cracking, but it's in for some reason in my earphones. Would this be a ready-made solution, or will this require work from the student union? It requires some work. So these electoral coalition compositions is something that we need to. It should be quite a small amount of work. And what about auditing this system? The interpreter also reaffirms it's 2,000 was the number. For this I can't answer, but it would be something that the CEC would probably do, or no. Here, I'm gonna maybe have the comment. Does Annika have the answer to my previous eligibility-related issue? Yes, of course, it's a good point, especially with fixed-term. The preliminary idea here is that the regulation and the electoral regulation would the REPCO or student union regulations would comply with the electoral regulations. Could Elina maybe check that? How did we, when we were discussing these narrowings, how would it go? The idea here is that if an individual is permanently employed by AYYE during the elections, or that the contract is starting, it would mean that the individual in question is ineligible because they can't be in the REPCO. For example, if we have like an individual who does not want to be employed by AYYE, that they would have these opportunities. Yes, the regulation stated that during the REPCO term, the individuals who are employed by the student union are not eligible. And it's also been mentioned later regarding eligible to vote. So can you check out, can you Annika roll to the part of where we discussed this? Yes, exactly so. On the regulations it was passed. Can't see the challenges on the part of this recruitment process. Fixed term contracts are a thing that if they already end kind of at a few months after the start of the rep code term. But you cannot be an employee and a vote-carrying member in the RepCo during the 2 months. So if we think about, like, during the RepCo term, we have individuals who are employed by AYYE are not eligible, then I would say that I would think about during the entire term, primarily. If we are talking about, like, if you have like a 2-month stint at the start of the term, that would probably not be the problem. I don't know if Annika knows. What do you think? I think that this is something that we can interpret. I honestly don't know. Primarily individuals who are in permanent work contracts. So if you have like a long-term fixed term contract, like a 1 or 2 years, it would be clear that individuals who are permanent or long-term employed, that they would be eligible. But this is kind of a pointless policy because it says on the regulations what we put on the regs are essentially items that cannot be interpreted. So these policies as is that they might actually could be just changed away. So fixed term contracts are still work contracts. So if you are available, you get accepted, then you get into a work contract. So it's kind of the possibility of segregation is very real. Thank you, Agade. Maybe let's say that we don't go into a dialogue, take other requests for the floor. So next up, we'll have Soivio. Timo will continue.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. But this open source code, to give a short comment, it's mentioned that prefer open source code. Systems based on open source code are preferred when possible, but if it's not possible for the student union to acquire such a system due to financial and timely reasons, there is flexibility in this condition. So it mentions both financial and timely resources, but apparently it means that the open source code would mean 3 months work, and this ready-made service that we could purchase would cost only 2,000 euros. Then I think that the student union really should be more flexible and not demand open source code, because if it would require 3 months work, it would be much more expensive that way. Thank you. Next we have Pollari. Yes, about this open source code. The proposal is that it's removed this end here on line 154, but this current phrasing does not prevent us from using open source code. It just says that we should have flexibility in this regard. Also want to mention that open source code is also mentioned in our policy paper. So I think it should be good if we would have a mention of an open source code here, even if we can't use it this year. But it's really important that it's mentioned. Thank you, Pollari. Any other request for floor for this item? Filman? Yes, I agree with Pollari. So if our current regulations already make it flexible, then I don't think we need to remove this demand for requirement for open source code. Yes, here highlighted in yellow, that's the addition that I want to have. So there's a mention of the open source code in this proposal, but it just states that we have this flexibility, because now we don't have this flexibility here. It's just a demand that it absolutely has to be based on open source code at the moment. So that's why I want to change that it will be more flexible, that there is not an absolute requirement. Any other request for floor? Apparently no. And if I understand correctly, Annika, you also wanted to have a preliminary vote. So please, Pyhäläinen ja Lindgren, get ready, and we will have this preliminary vote, a test vote, in the same way as we have done before on Zoom, using the raise hand function. So first the yes votes, and then the no votes, and then the empty votes. Yes. Thank you, Annika. I'll start sharing my screen. But first we have a point of order. Filman. Just if they are put here on the screen, then that's what I was about to say. So thank you. Yes, hopefully you can now see what we're now voting on in this preliminary vote. We could also have a yes and no. So yes, the first option is yes. And yes, Filman, another point of order. I want to emphasize that this open source voting system doesn't necessarily mean that we will have to have a paper elections in autumn 2021. We could also purchase an open source code system. The way I understand it, it's that it's not possible to purchase it or not possible to set it up. So if you want an open source voting system, then it means that we will have a paper-based election for this autumn, and then we would have an open source system in the next elections. Yes, actually, we have some tenders already ongoing. Okay, thank you. I didn't know that. Petteri, did you know about this? Or Annika? About these bids for an open source system. Yes, our head of IT says that we don't have an option for an open source voting system. But yes, now let's have the preliminary vote.
Yes, Lindgren.
And yes, Lindgren.
Yes, täältä ääntenlaskijan puolesta
as a vote counter, asking that could you please keep your hands raised until we, the vote counters, say in the chat that you can lower them. Yes, excellent addition. So please keep your hands raised until both vote counters have said that they have counted the votes. And yes, point of order, Filman. I propose that this yes vote would be changed to closed source voting if no open source voting system is possible. I think it's possible, or what do you think, Elina? Yes, so we can add it here, but I think it's very clear that we don't have this option. We can add it here, But the Representative Council should acknowledge that at the moment we don't have a possibility to have an open source system for this autumn's elections. Thank you. Are both vote counters ready, and are you familiar with the procedure? And does everyone know what we are voting about and how the votes are counted, and etc.?
Olettaisin tässä vaiheessa, että kun kukaan ei mitään kommentoi, sieltä tuli.
No comments, so I think it's clear. Yes, Sinikka and Pyhälammi are both ready.
Ovat molemmat ääntenlaskijat valmiita.
Our vote counters are ready, and we can start to open the preliminary vote, which helps the Central Election Committee in their work. This is not any kind of a decision yet.
Tosiaan aloitetaan äänestys, eli ensimmäisenä
Let's start the vote. First, we have here on the screen closed source voting system if an open source system is not available, but currently it's not available. If you want to vote for this, raise your hands now.
Ja näin molemmat ääntenlaskijat ovat valmiita, joten
both vote counters are now ready, so please lower your hands. Let's wait a moment for everyone to lower them.
No niin, mulla ei enää näy yhtäkään kättä ylhäällä.
Okay, all hands are lowered. Hopefully vote counters have the votes written down. Then for the no vote. So if you want to have an open source voting system, which would mean that we will have an election on paper in the autumn of 2021, raise your hand now.
Kiitoksia. Tässä vaiheessa molemmat.
Thank you. To our vote counters, they have now said that they are ready, so please lower your hands. And then we have last the empty votes. So if you want to vote empty, please raise your hands now. Thank you. Both vote counters are ready, so you may lower your hand. And now vote counters, if you could please state the vote count. Lindgren, if you may start. Yes, 31 yes votes, 0 no votes, 1 empty vote. Thank you. And Pyhälammi. Same result. Yes, 31, no 0, empty 1. Thank you. I hope that this is clear enough for you, Annika. And for the Central Election Committee. Now, I will close discussion. And we can move on to the decision. The motion was that the Rapsec Council decided to record the preliminary debate on the topic. It has been decided. Closing item 9. Moving to item 10. Economic review of association activities from January to March 2021. Monika, please. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Try to keep this presentation short so that you can leave on time. Of course, feel free to ask if you have any questions. Either here during the meeting or after it. And also I want to inform you that I've updated my presentation during this meeting. I had time to go through it, and I noticed a small error which I have now corrected. So we now have the economic review of our associations for the first quarter of this year. In the previous version that you were sent, there was a plus here on the black, but now it's on the minus. There was just a wrong kind of calculation here. Usually our goal is to break even, just to be as close to 0 as possible, so that we would use our fundraising funds according to the budget. And the reason why I have a different total sum here on the next slide. But yes, would be a bit on the red after the first 3 months, but we have the deficit is less than what we budgeted actually. So all other areas have stayed within the budget, or there have been less expenses than were budgeted, except for our support functions we have exceeded the budget. Here we can see our fundraising items for association activities. So we have the membership fees, 860,000 euros for the whole year. And it's now a bit less than what we budgeted for these first 3 months. And there have been a bit more expenses related to the collection of membership fees. And the profit from investments and administrative charges from the real estates, they are in the gray here, and there was just an error in the formula because it was calculated according to the first third of the year, not the first quarter, as was intended. This report is kind of done very manually, so these human errors are possible. But we've done a lot of developments in improvements in our reporting, so hopefully in the future we don't have to do this manually anymore to prevent these errors. And the profit from investments, that's the item related to the budget framework, which has been 550,000 euros for ages. The goal is to get it to 500,000. And when we talked about the student center, we also discussed whether we can increase it from 550. But yes, 550, it's 1/4 of our total. This 137,000 is 1/4 from our total. I also wanted to say that we have a very good quarter when it comes to our investments. And for our administrative charges, but it's for now for a second year, we actually now enter it here. And this is the amount that we charge our real estates. And I should prepare that when in the news from the central office it was mentioned that if we sell some of our properties, then it means that we cannot, that our administrative charges will also decrease a bit. But of course, if we sell a property, that would mean that we may possibly also increase the framework. So just a reminder about the mechanisms behind the funding for our association activities. When we look at our community operations, we can see that the coronavirus has affected it a lot. Our personal costs, they're in the red, but otherwise we only see green here. So we have less expenses than what we budgeted. This means that we've had less events because of the coronavirus pandemic. And the grants have not yet been entered here. Of course, they've been budgeted, but there are no kind of nothing that exceptional here, except for the circumstances related to the coronavirus. And here in the advocacy side, we only have a kind of we have personal costs. It's very close to our budget. And our sustainable development budget, we put here as a possible expense, but we haven't had a sustainable development expert. So we haven't used this allocated budget item. And for our member services, we have more expenses than budgeted in our common income and costs for member services, but in our rental of facilities we have been very close to the budget. A bit of a surplus, but you can also see here that we've had some facility expenses, even though most of the facilities have been closed down.
katettua vuokrilla, niin tavallaan näistä talousmielessä se ei kovinkaan pitkälle näy sit välttämättä, että onko tilat...
So finance-wise, it doesn't really reflect on the budget that much, whether the facilities are closed or not.
Halua ja toivetta olisi, että vuokrauspuolella...
But of course, everyone want to get our rental facilities open again. Then for our administration costs, when we look at the total, we are very close to the budget. There are a lot of other variation between the different items here, but now we have went over the budget in personal costs, but then otherwise we went under the budget. Now we can also see from these figures that our central office has been closed. So it has been more cost efficient when our people have worked from home. And in a total 4,000 euros. Less than budgeted expenses. And in communications wise, very similar to our advocacy sector. Advocacy costs. Our personal costs are very close to what was budgeted. And these other common costs, they are less than budgeted. Our only theme for this year was to do less and communicate more. So we have a lot of communication projects that we have started, but they didn't cause expenses yet during the first quarter. And yes, then our support functions, we have most items that are in the red here, but I at least think that these are important investments that we needed to make. So for personal costs, we are within budget pretty well. Now we increased our consultation. We have more consultation in our finances and real estate side than what was budgeted. They have cost more than we thought. And for our IT side, we now enter more expenses to this item. And of course we have made some purchases and have wanted to make them. But we can see that this is the place where we have exceeded the budget the most. Yes, this was my summary. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Opening discussion. Any request for floor? First we have Jaatinen. Jaatinen from Luova. So communication costs made me think that because we talked a lot that we need to invest in communications, you want more of communications. But is there some project that hasn't been done, or why are there so? Why are the costs so low? Because we everyone want to see more communications, want to invest more in it. Yes, when budgeted, it has been allocated for the entire year evenly between the different quarters. But our kind of the first 2 months are always more kind of just orientation related to the projects, especially strategic communication projects and the visualization project for the strategy. I think they mostly started in April, even though there was a lot of preparatory work and tendering before that. But I believe that the investments we've made to communications Well, we've invested time and resources at the office. And the consultation has also been a great help. Yes, thank you. Any other requests for floor?
Toteaisin, että ei näköjään ole.
Apparently no. Thank you, Monica, for this thorough review, closing discussion, and we can make the decision. The motion was that the Council decide to record the January-March economic review of association activities. This has been decided. Closing item 10, moving to item 11, other business.
Opening discussions. Are there any other emerging items on the other business?
Ei ilmeisestikään
No.
ole.
So I actually hijack this because at the end we have this the Replico has been told that scrutinizers of the minutes should be eligible for lunch slips, and I have actually managed to develop this further, and we have actually managed to gain these lunch slips, and we are almost ready with this, that I'm accepting the invoice, after which I may give these out. So everybody who's done scrutinizing of the minutes, you may pick them up from me, and all who are still doing this year, you may, after their checkup, you get a free lunch with the lunch slip. So I will send all of you email regarding the items, so we will maybe have a time frame when you can pick them up. Thank you. Any other emerging matters? Soivio. Yes, I thought I'd mentioned on the fact that lately we've discussed, or it has been a topic of discussion, is that when discussing the board choices, the transfer of votes, we've discussed that a bit. But I also told to all the repcos that this situational discussion is ongoing. In earlier years, it's usually late that it never actually, no decisions or amendments have been made before the choice of the board, and you usually kind of forget it afterwards. So that's something that maybe could be discussed and undertaken before the fall.
Yes.
Any other requests? Can I ask about Soivio's? Because it mentioned that are just taking place, that the representative council have a wish for a proposal for amendments or to the regulations, so that we don't have to do this process again, which is longish, but doable. But there's something to be considered. This is being planned from a resource point of view. I'm interested in the outcome. Regrettably, I am not knowledgeable of this, that we have been discussing this, because it's something that will be a hot topic in the future, but it's usually something that we kind of discuss and then we kind of forget about it. But this is something that we need to ask from the people who know about it. Next up, Pollari. Thank you. Seconding Soivio's point. That we usually have this like, okay, this might not be the best method, but now it's too late to do anything. that it's good to focus on this at this stage, that should be something that we could discuss and maybe workshop. Thank you. Then Leinonen. Yes, thank you. It's good that this is being discussed at this time of the year. I'd like to mention that I'd be more than happy to be available if somebody wants to discuss the subject. Outside of the REPCO meetings, we may change ideas of the subject and maybe discuss on how other Finnish student unions do their forming of the board. I've been asking benchmarking, etc. So may send some email to me. Let's get back to business regarding that. Okay, do we have any other emerging matters? Looks like no. So closing discussions and moving to closing item 11, moving on to item 12, closing of the meeting. And I thus declare the meeting closed at 1 minute past 8 p.m. Which means that this about 2 hours and 44 minutes. Thank you. So, next meeting will be in 1 month. Will be the last meeting of the spring term. We will be having it as a remote meeting. At this stage, thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Nice and early this day.
Keep.
Moi.
Moi moi.
Moikka moi.
Cheers.
Moi moi.
See ya.
Cheers, see ya.
Hei hei.